Experienced a very tough adversity early in their project, right before they started developing. And I knew that how they handled this could make or break them as a team. Well, to say the least, they overcame that adversity. And in my opinion, I feel they developed one of the most unique and entertaining games that I've seen come out of Final Project. They're already coming up on the stage. Atmosphere Games.
Thank you, Barry. So like Barry said, we're Atmosphere Games, and we're here to present to you our game, Kitchen Krashers.
Yay!
I am Steve Emmett, the internal producer. Here we have Kurt Young, Zach Anderson, Matthew Walker, Joseph Stewart, Kyle Jumara, Andrew Gleason,
Yay!
Matt, every time, Michael Denon, and Travis Sawyers.
Yay!
Now that I've told you who we are, I'm going to pass it over to Andrew, who's going to tell you what the game's about.
Go great!
Thank you, Steve. As you said, my name is Andrew Gleason. I was one of the programmers for Atmosphere Games. I'm going to give you a quick overview of our game, Kitchen Krashers. So, in Kitchen Krashers, players assume the role of an ant and take part in our wacky twist on the sport curling. I'm going to go ahead and assume that there's probably one or two of you who aren't familiar with curling and explain that quickly. So, as you can see, curling is a winter sport involving brooms and heavy rocks and ice and occasionally women, in which two teams take turns sliding their stones. Now you laugh, thanks. In which two teams take turns sliding their stones toward a goal at the end of the ice rink. After so many turns, the team that has their stone the closest to the bullseye of that goal is the team that wins. It's a very cooperative sport. As you can see, one player will do the initial sliding of the stone, and the other players will run alongside it, sweeping to control the speed and direction of that stone. So we wanted to keep some of the main aspects of curling for our game, but we also had a very wacky vision that we wanted to maintain. So one of the biggest things we changed right off the bat, as you can see, is that our game isn't set on boring, empty ice rinks. We actually have several crazy, wacky, very inventive levels that you'll hear about more in a few minutes. However, what I want to draw your attention to right now are these glowing cubes you see sprinkled around each level. These are what we call sugar bits. There's a better picture of them, and they are worth 5 points each. You see, we have a point system. That's what's good. You see, we have a point system in Kitchen Krashers. Players earn points from picking up these sugar bits and colliding with walls and other objects in the game. And at the end of the game, the player with the highest score is the player that wins. This allows us to make another interesting gameplay change, and that we no longer really need the goal at all. But since it is such a big part of curling, we knew we wanted to keep it around. So we made it a multiplier. For example, let's say you've earned 10 points with your current stone, and you happen to land on the bullseye. You get an 8 times multiplier, and you now have 80 points to add to your total score, instead of just 10. This rewards players who are still skilled enough to land on the goal, but doesn't punish players who aren't skilled enough to do that. You can actually still win a game of Kitchen Krashers without ever touching the goal, provided you do better than the other players, provided you earn more points than them. Lastly, as you may recall, traditional curling is a very, very cooperative game. It requires a lot of effort on all the team members to do what they want to do. None of that at all is in Kitchen Krashers. We cut that out entirely. And the reason for this is that we found when we were researching other multiplayer games that it's a lot of fun to screw over other people, especially if those people happen to be friends of yours. So systems like the point system and the goal multiplier and power-ups you'll hear about in a few minutes, those are all catered to maximize the effect that one player can have on another player's score. So I'll leave you a quick example of this. Let's say, hypothetically, your name is Phil Marinowski. You're an art director and you're in the back of the room somewhere. And you just got a bullseye. You're ecstatic. You got a bullseye. That doesn't happen all that often. Unfortunately, you're playing with your friend Barry, and Barry's not all that happy you got a bullseye. In fact, he's a wee bit jealous. So Barry heads straight for the whipped cream power-up, rockets across the sink water, and smashes into your poor defenseless little bottle cap, knocking you not only off the target, or not only off the bullseye, but off the target entirely. You lose like 1,000 points. You're heartbroken. Barry's laughing at you. That is Kitchen Krashers, and with that, I'm going to hand things over to Brendan Bax, who's going to show you some of those crazy levels.
Thank you, Andrew. As I said, I'm Brendan Bax, the art lead here for Atmosphere Games, and you're probably asking, why are we a bunch of ants in the kitchen? And I'd say, why not? Our theme from our game is pretty unique. The idea behind it is, it's a kitchen with all these people, and they're on vacation. You know how dads are. We're going to Disney World. Come on, let's go. You're cooking. I don't care. Get out of there. So they left all this stuff out, and the ants moved it around to make obstacle courses to ride around on. And it was really unique to make because no one's ever made a game like that. Usually, you make an RPG or a shooting game, something sci-fi, traditional. Here we're making like a kitchen, and we felt more like interior designers more than game artists. But it was a lot of fun to make art for this game. Also, the theme helped shape our gameplay. As Andrew mentioned, we have a whipped cream power-up. We have 5 power-ups total, all inspired by food items. Also, the level design is another thing shaped by our theme. Things like condensation on the glass. It makes a puddle. No big deal to us, right? But if you're an ant this big, that's a big deal. What do? Do you go around it? Do you splash through it? So all this affected our level design and ultimately our final gameplay, and it wound up being way more fun and entertaining. Let's meet our ants, though. As you can see here, we have 4 ants to choose from, all of which are color coordinated to match the cap they ride around on. And what happens is your ant backs up into a gummy worm, right? He launches onto a cap, rides around the level sweeping and stuff, and eventually after your turn, your cap flips over and you can see, oh, that's my cap, that's my color. You know what cap to hit, what cap to aim for, and who to screw over in multiplayer. Now, the ants themselves, obviously they're extremely realistic. Not really though, real ants are gross. We wanted to keep our game approachable and fun, so we gave them, bright colors, 2 arms, 2 legs, goofy textures, and the best part is for every power-up, you get a silly hat. Everyone loves silly hats. Our level design, we did try to keep it more fun as well. We did a lot of hand-painted textures, very meticulous. We have a lot of stuff in our game. We have way more assets than we really needed, but if you have the same jelly jar in every level, it just gets boring, so we had to keep making more and more art. It was kind of a big hurdle for us. This particular level is our freezer. Since curling is a winter sport, we want to introduce the player to the game in a similar environment, so we have them in a freezer. It's at the beginning level. The next level is sort of our intermediate. It's the sink. As you noticed, it's a lot bigger. It's about 5 times the size of the freezer. We have all 5 power-ups, more hazards, more obstacles, and a big sink obstacle with a rubber duck. Finally, we have the stove. As you can see here, there's tons of stuff on the stove. It's saturated with objects. It is the most challenging level in our game, and also the most fun because of it. It takes a while to master and find the perfect route, but when you're playing alone, it's a nice challenge. Also, with your friends, you can really mess up a good shot because it takes you so long to get to the bullseye, you're there, and then someone just knocks you right out, and it's terrible. Another thing to mention, though, about our game is our lighting. This is what it looks like in-game. We have no lights in our game, though. We decided we would bake all the information out into the models using Maya, a software we use to make the game. And mad props to Chad Kendall for helping us out with this. But basically, we took all the art, gave us more control over the lighting. We were able to set a mood for the game, as well as keep a more cohesive style. But more importantly, our software engineers could focus more on the gameplay, making it fun, balancing it out, and adding more and more features. And it totally worked. Our game is a blast because of the time they put into it. And to tell you more about it is Matt Walker.
Thank you, Brendan. Once again, I'm Matt Walker, developer for Atmosphere Games. And as Brendan already showed you in some of our awesome art, there are tons of objects that are separating you and your friends from the goal. So obviously, you're going to be colliding with a lot of those objects all the time. So I'm going to take a moment to explain what exactly happens when you do that. Alright, now while you're cruising around on your bottle cap, racking up sugar bits and scoring points, we check to see if you happen to be hitting any of the objects in the level. And if you do, we get something that's called a normal, which is basically an arrow that points directly away from the object itself. And we take that normal, and what we do is we reflect upon it to get the new direction we're going to go. It's kind of like if you throw a basketball onto the ground. It bounces or reflects off the ground and continues going in its new direction. And in our game, it looks a little something like this. Anthony's heading towards the pizza box. He's got his direction, racking up sugar bits, rocking and rolling. Hits the pizza box, we gather our normal, and bam, new direction, you're one step closer to the goal, owning your friends, and having a good time. And now I'm going to hand it to Kurt to continue talking about the rest of our technologies.
Thank you very much, Matt. My name is Kurt Young, and I'm also a developer here at Atmosphere Studios. And I'm going to talk to you about a really cool, exciting technology we've implemented in our game called multi-threading. You may be asking, what is multi-threading? It's essentially the ability to allow the computer to multitask at one time. It's really effective in our game because not only can we render at one time, we can also go and calculate the collision or the score of the game. Threading comes with one big drawback though, and that's crashes. Now the best way I can describe crashes is kind of like if you're driving a car or a bus with 2 steering wheels. If 2 people try and drive at once, it's likely you're going to crash. In our game, if both threads try to access the same bit of information at once, we will get a crash. Just kind of a little bus crash showing off. Now, to prevent against this, we developed a technology we call our threaded event system. Now, our threaded event system is like the Postal Service. You're asking why? Well, it's because we create events which are like letters, and the event system passes these letters around, safely to prevent crashes. Here's a little diagram. Our render thread wants to communicate with our update thread to tell that we're in a different state. We've gone into the game now. He needs to create an event or a letter. He then puts it in our central mailbox. Once it's there, when the update thread is ready, it goes, collects the letter, and then handles it. And this is how we prevent against crashes. Now to talk about what went right and what went wrong in our game, I return you to our amazing internal producer, Steve.
Thank you, Kurt. So, with any project, there are advantages and disadvantages and hurdles to overcome. Some of the advantages we ran into were efficient art production. Our artists got together early on and made very high quality, low poly models that we could get into the game very quickly, and they look amazing, and I'm very happy for them. Next was our simple gameplay. Because of how simple the gameplay was, the development team was able to get it playable, fun, test it, do amazing things with it very, very quickly, which allowed us to get in more features that we wanted to add. Lastly, we had communication. Communication between our team was very good. We all were very cohesive in what we talked about. We wanted to be on the same page at all times, so we talked over every design decision we made. And that led us to have an amazing game that we have now. Unfortunately, there were some bad things. We had some exporter issues with scale. The artist would make something, we'd export it, put it in the game, and it'd be gargantuan, or it'd be extremely small, you couldn't even see it. Thankfully, Andrew is amazing, and can fix all of those issues in a day or two, which is pretty great. Unfortunately, though, Andrew's car was stolen. This caused us a bit of issues trying to find where he was at all times, because, Andrew, he goes off and does whatever he wants. We had to pick him up, take him to the meetings, get him back home. It was a bit of work. But, again, our team was amazing, so they didn't mind taking time out of their busy days to go pick up Andrew, take him to the meetings, and bring him home. Early on in the production, we lost 2 other internal producers. This really hit the team's morale, brought it down very low. And they really had to band together to bring the game to where it is, and they did. They put in the extra hours, they did the extra work, and the game is amazing, and I'm very proud of each and every one of them for the amount of effort they put into this, and what we've gotten so far. Lastly, animations. As you can see, Anthony's a little messed up there. Animations caused us a bunch of problems. It took Kurt quite a few days to get it working, and he talked with many faculty to figure out what was wrong, and he eventually did, but it put a little bit of damper in our scheduling. And because of these hindrances, we learned quite a few things. First off, Maya's programming interface is very difficult to use, as Kurt found out, and Andrew. But they mastered it, and they made our exporters extremely good. They can now export anything they want, and it works perfectly in-game. Communication was also very key. As I said before, we had excellent communication, but without that, our game would not be nearly as good as it is. And lastly, some things aren't perfect, but just good enough. And what I mean by this is, in every development cycle, you have to make a choice between whether you want to continue working on something or stop and say this is good enough. And there are some features that you work on and you want to perfect it, but you just don't have the time. So you want to make sure that you know when to stop, step back and be like, this is good, I like this, let me move on to this next thing, instead of just polishing until it's not going to get anywhere. Now, with that, who would like to see an amazing game made by Atmosphere Games?